Good afternoon, everyone. It's really a pleasure to be here. Let me stop sharing and share again. So we had a really fun day yesterday. We learned a lot from some of the pioneers. And I try to continue and give you some insight into, from my point of view, and a little bit of my story. So that's why you will see a lot of videos and a bunch of timelines that we discuss. So let me just make sure. Do you see my starting? Thanks. Okay. So I tried to talk about a little bit, my own approach to medical augmented reality. So I started to get into AR, true industrial augmented reality in 94, 95. And then we had a few minutes of fame at the end of 90s because of some of those works. I start with that and listen to the last few seconds, which was some start of something.
And now, here's Tech Live's Michaela Pereira.
Take a look at the factory of the future. It's virtual and shows what's wrong inside a real factory. Researchers are blending databases and wireless technology to create a virtual factory aimed at enhancing efficiency. Rick Lockridge took a tour in Princeton, New Jersey.
Pressure information, please.
This is the factory of the future.
The current inlet pressure to the nozzles at 100 psi is very high.
Siemens Corporate Research is working on a way to make the entire plant intelligent.
One is the real image of the factory that you see here. By clicking on an object, you can actually get all the information on that object, because this image is intelligent. Behind this image, you have the drawing, and behind this image, you have the virtual board, which is connected to the database.
The system employs a combination of database and visualization tools called augmented reality. It can wirelessly tell and show workers everything they need to know about a facility.
You are in front of the main water valve.
About potential problems.
The valve is currently shut off. The water pressure was dangerously high.
Even a device's life history.
When will last maintained?
Last repaired on June 30th, 1990 by John Smith.
70% of the workers in the United States are working away from an office. If you can enable them to get all the information you have in your offices, you will increase their efficiency.
Siemens says pilot programs will be running in 1 to 2 years and full-blown operations installed in 5 to 7 years. Rick Lockridge, Tech TV, Princeton, New Jersey.
Siemens is also developing a similar technology, making maps of the human body, helping surgeons locate tumors and other troubles.
So that was then. Let me, I want to share again and then stop the optimization of the video because I think it's not doing well. And now again, I can't find the thing, but that's okay. Then I continue with the optimization. Okay. Now, sometimes later, a few years before the introduction of HoloLens into the thing, this is in 2014, BBC was in our lab, and you see a little bit what we were doing at that time.
Inside their patients without the need for cutting them open.
For many people, interaction with augmented reality has become a daily occurrence.
Wait, what my phone? No, you can turn it. I turned it. Oh, sorry.
It can help us if we get lost, entertain us if we get bored, even suggest somewhere to have lunch. Here in Munich, researchers are looking at how augmented reality technology can change our approach to surgery and how operations are performed across the world. The research into augmented reality in medicine is overseen by Professor Nassir Navab. He's been involved in medical imaging since the 1990s. He started by showing me the sort of AR that's currently being used in education.
So when we see this, as you see of course, all the bones of the upper part of your body, starting with the hip, going up with the spine and ribs. But also you can see the intestine, you can see the liver, you can see the heart, the lung.
That's if I move my arm up, then we're seeing all these things. This is a demonstration, so although we're seeing the inside of a real body, it's not my body. But in the future, patients will be able to view their own scans overlaid on themselves. But this kind of tech is already being used in real operations.
So basically, in many orthopedic surgery or hand or wrist surgery, they usually only use X-ray. But then in order to find out where they want to do the cut, they do it by, for example, positioning a knife on the patient and then taking another image, or by mentally matching that X-ray with the patient. However, when they use this augmented reality, they can actually bring on the optics onto the X-ray. So because there is a camera which is co-aligned with the X-ray system at all time, and now the doctor can look both at optics and X-ray.
So that's amazing, isn't it? You're actually seeing the hand there.
Yes, you see your hand.
You're seeing the hand, and you're seeing the image of the X-ray superimposed over the hand.
Exactly, and then the doctors can discuss and say, if I want to insert the implant into the body, what would be the optimal cut? And they can actually draw it, and when they are happy, then they go ahead and then they bring the tool, but this time they can see it directly on the screen where their tool is going in relation to the internal anatomy.
You're not going to find this in every operating room in the world at the moment. It's still just a trial.
It still was a trial on about 40 patients. Since this is only complementing the surgeon with information, the certification and validation is much, much easier than, let's say a robotic cutting system or a different treatment system.
Some of those 40 operations using AR were carried out by Professor Dr. Eckhard Euler from the Ludwig Maximilians University, which is also in Munich. How did you find it as a surgeon to actually use this new technology that's only just being developed?
It's very easy to do it. You don't have to learn much complicated procedures. It's very intuitive. You have more security because you have more information available.
So what are the benefits for a patient?
The benefits for patient is to have less X-ray application, and this is the same benefit for the operating team as well.
So it means that you don't have to X-ray at every stage of the surgery?
Right.
Do you think in 5–10 years' time we'll be seeing more of this type of technology because it is more beneficial to you?
Yes, I think it will be more and more important in our field. The systems will be much cheaper than today. I think this will be the future.
And the future could be where the surgeon can appear to look directly into the body using a headset. That's amazing. It looks like I'm looking into the student's back and seeing his rib cage and his spine. The image is able to be overlaid by the use of 4 cameras around the operating theatre, which track markers on the patient's body in 3-dimensional space. By synchronizing the tracking data from these 4 cameras with the data obtained by a CT, ultrasound or MRI scan, the doctor looking through the headset is able to see inside the patient's body. So the image that I'm seeing looks completely 3D.
Yes, as you see in front of you, there are 2 displays, and therefore when you adjust it for your eyes, you will see a full 3D display because you have this stereoscopic view, and the data we are bringing in is also 3D. The design has to improve, it has to become lighter, it may be hanging from the ceiling. It would become a routine, I would say, probably in 5 to 7 years.
5 to 7 years. A decade ago, augmented reality in medicine would have seemed like something out of science fiction. but by combining existing technologies such as CT scans and X-rays with this new technology, researchers here have created something that has the potential to revolutionize surgery in the years ahead.
So basically, let me try to see if I can get rid of the optimization. I'm trying to go out of. Funny, I can't do that. It's very funny. Okay, doesn't matter because the optimization make it a little bit shaky. So this was, this set was before 2 years. It was 2014, and then later, the HoloLens came, in which the system had advanced and light display system, and also using PTAM, using SLAM, they could co-localize the user and the display within the environment with machine learning and computer vision. So the next video is in German, but I tell you a little bit what the story is. This is, again, this time it's German TV. Some of our undergrad students did some projects using HoloLens to help assistant to get to know the new, the new instruments inside the operating room. Later, you will see some application of that to knee surgery with using HoloLens this time. And finally, you see again the penetration of the system you saw on BBC into the training of about 950 medical students in Munich and about 380 in Johns Hopkins. And the fact that we can move from those magic mirror system now gradually into using head-mounted display for those applications too. Okay, I just wanted to show you some of the things through the time, 90s, then early 2010, after 2010, and then after the introduction of HoloLens and Magic Leap, who they are still, I don't believe they would completely replace video see-through systems, but because of the compactness, because of the quality of the display, because of all the system around it, which has been built together, provides a lot of opportunity for researchers to work towards, simple solutions for augmented reality. But throughout the year, you saw Professor Euler very often, but in fact, one of my PhD students, Jabad, was telling what he learned from us was that basically what we are optimizing as a function, most of all, is this function that he defines between doctors, surgeons, and computational scientists, where we try to be co-located X, Y, Z, spend time together T, but the most important was to bring our information close together. So each of us from different fields have a complete set of different education, different knowledge, different information. And during this collaboration in time and space, we are trying to bring it, optimize, minimize this distance, and then come to a very, some fruitful outcome for patient at the end. And these are a selection of about 12 of them who worked very closely with us, but there are many. Maybe I am missing another 20 or 30 clinical partners who are essential for this. Now, since I was in some conferences and people were thinking that augmented reality or medical augmented reality was only invented in the last 5 years after, there was even a doctor who was telling medical augmented reality started by the introduction of HoloLens. So like Terry, I wanted to say, to show, at least give credit to some background. I try to do it faster because Terry also talked about some of this work yesterday. So their work is starting from 93, 92 by Henry Fuchs' ideas that he brought in for head-mounted display visualization. Don't forget that at that time, power of computation was miserable and tracking and synchronization was very hard, but the ideas were brilliant and very advanced of their time. Eddie Edwards, as also Terry mentioned yesterday, and Dave Hawkes, they had a lot of nice work together with Zeiss to include the display inside the microscope, and they even brought it to exemplary patient where they could superimpose the vasculature segmented in MR or CT onto the microscopic view in the neurosurgery. They had, as Terry also mentioned, they had big problem of depth perception and workflow integration. Ron Kickenes and Grimson and the whole team in '96, they also brought external cameras looking into the scene and did registration. And then they superimpose in the external video the anatomy, and this they also had the problem of depth perception and workflow integration. In particular, the camera outside was at a position which could not be always optimal for a surgery. In '98, we at Siemens Corporate Research and in Erlangen, we developed this joint X-ray optics by attaching the camera to the X-ray source, and this was allowing to go towards doing later some of the first surgeries in those directions with the combination. DeJoy et al. In '98, they created this window, AR window between the doctor and the patient to show the CT on top of this semi-transparent display. Later, this was developed into some companies in Germany, two systems called ARCS and the other one MedARPA. Their main problem was they had many complex tracking systems. They had to track the head of the doctor, the instruments, the display, and they were using different tracking systems, but the idea is still valuable and nice, and I think at some point will be applicable to many applications. Then they inspired a lot of other works also. George Stetten in 2000 attached a mirror to ultrasound and they put the display also on the ultrasound, and ended up being an intelligent system which could show the ultrasound directly on the area where you were taking the ultrasound. Very, very interesting. The problem was 3D and perception. There was no 3D and the perception was difficult. Ultrasound is already difficult to see. So in this case was a little bit of difficulty, but the system was quite genius. Wolfgang Birkfellner created the varioscope, which was again a magnifier, but with displays integrated, and tried to use it for maxillofacial surgery. His problem again at the end was the tracking and the precision which was needed for maxillofacial. Gabor Fichtinger and Masamune, they did this integration of the mirror into the CT and CT system, mostly for liver needle placement. That also Terry Peters yesterday talked about. Frank Sauber in 2000, from my point of view, did a great work with his team of Frank Sauber, Ali Kamen, and Sebastian Vogt, and they made some of the dreams of Henry Fuchs realized, because at that time, the quality of the display and the power of computation was higher, and they did a very nice system called RAMP that later we used in Munich for many of our applications and try to solve some of their problem of depth perception and workflow integration. And end of 2004, 2003, Stefan Nicolo at Strasbourg, they also used external cameras to actually augment, register CT in laparoscopic surgery and augment those surgeries based on external cameras. Quite a nice work. The registration was difficult, and the fact that the view against were static was some problems, but very nice work that they also continued. So these are very early, I would say, until 2004. Of course, this continued, and etc. But now I wanted to get, after 2008, there was, and up to 2013, an explosion and a lot of other works that I'm not covering here. These were only the basic early work. Now, the definition, I want to talk a little bit about it. Even Terry talked about this, Paul Milgram's continuum. Even though in '93, when he talked about it, I think it was valuable and good. I am not fully in support of this. I would like more what Christopher Stapleton mixed reality continuum talks about. And this is what Christopher is presenting, Christopher Stapleton, where he actually brings in the imagination into this continuum. And that's what I really, really like, because in fact, if you do that, first of all, you are also you can talk about things like reading a novel or watching a movie, or you can talk about then magic show and theme park. But in general, one of the major things, it puts the user at the center. It puts the effect on the imagination at the center. And for me, philosophically, this is how we should look at it, because the result is also how to design it and how to evaluate it goes to imagination, not anything else. And for that, I wanted to go back now 2,400 years ago and listen a little bit to Aristotle. But on the, this is Arthur Holmes, his history of philosophy, and he talks a little bit about how Aristotle was talking about our sensing.
Sensation.
Let's listen to it.
And he talks a little bit more about this later on in his Psychology, De Anima, on the soul, than he does in the Posterior Analytics. But his view is that in sensation, what our physical senses, what they apprehend, is the form of a particular thing without its material. Now, that's not very strange when you figure that the matter couldn't possibly get in your eye. The matter of this marker couldn't possibly get in your ear, you see. The matter remains intact. But what the senses apprehend is the form, shape, smell, color, without the material that has the shape, smell, color. Okay? Now, what we have then is a vast barrage of sensations of that sort, coming through the five senses. In addition to the five senses, he takes it that there is an additional sense that he calls the sensus communis. And I give you the Latin term that's used in discussing it, because the English translation would obviously be common sense. But it ain't common sense in our sense of common sense, not in the common sense of common sense. You see? The sensus communis is sort of a unifying sense that correlates and integrates the various senses. So that I have this sensory capacity with regards to this marker of coordinating the smell, color, shape, feel, touch, all at once, and seeing it as having to do with one object. Sensus communis. An integrating sensory capacity. Okay? Now, obviously, we need something like that. We would say, I suppose, that the central nervous system does it. The brain does it. Well, he's a little before the days of brain science. So he has a sensus communis. But this multiplicity of sensations are, as it were, retained in the mind. There's a memory recalling, retaining, accumulating sensations. And this process of accumulating sensations leads us to taking all of these sensations.
Okay, it's fascinating. We could listen to Holmes for many hours. I love it. But basically what he's telling after that is that this creates in the memory, gives us the organized experience. And after a while, the combination of memory and organized experience create intuition, creates what we see from the outside. For me, this is very related to, to that continuum of Stapleton, where he puts the memory or the imagination in the middle of everything. Now, the only difference here is in augmented reality, we may even hear, as we will see in the sonification, we may even hear the material. We may even see the physiology. So we are going to augment the senses of human beyond the 5 senses that we have into the unlimited number of senses that our machinery has. And this is really the future of augmented reality. So we started with my students to brainstorm, and that's what I would like to, with all of the participants of this summer school to do. We started to brainstorm what are the components of a medical augmented reality system, an augmented reality system. And after like 5 hours of discussion, we came to this, but this is something to be completed, something all of you have to contribute to it, and we could discuss throughout the summer school about that. So what are the components? We decided that, okay, first of all, we need to model the physical world. The computer has to model the physical world. Now, we have something here. I give you some examples. There are many things are missing from this picture. Like people here could be patients, surgeons, surgical crew. We have to know them, we have to track them, we have to reconstruct them, we have to understand them. Then our eyes, the eyes in the real world could be also X-ray, could be optical cameras, ultrasound. The viewpoint could be an X-ray frustum, could be an optical field of view, could be an ultrasound beam mode or 3D. These are all belonging to reality now. The reality goes beyond what our senses are observing. The reality is everything in the reality that our technology allows to reconstruct in the real world. But on the other side, the computer that we work with has to understand, has to appreciate, has to reconstruct. So we will have computer sensing, which are beyond our sensing, hopefully, but include our sensing. Then we need to do a lot of sensor fusion. For that, we have things like transformations, localization, tracking, registration, a lot of things that we have to do in order to generate computer perception. But perception is not only reconstruction. Perception is a lot of AI, a lot of understanding what is beneath everything, what is the relationship. And then we found out that for all of this, we need calibration as engineers. And then we need to generate this digital world. And now this digital world, is perceived by a computer. And the more intelligent computer can reconstruct, perceive this environment, the better the computer can act and present us those in terms of augmented reality. Now, this is some of our latest reconstruction. We are able in Munich, through 2 projects of ArtecMed and Atlas, of filling the room with sensors and recording 4D surgeries, A to Z, with everything synchronized, not only the external views, but also the internal laparoscopic views, the X-ray views and frustums, the sound, we are recording all the communication and the sounds of everything. So now this series of things, we have done now 5 surgeries, we will have at the end 27. All of them are going to be a full sense reconstruction, including laparoscopy, X-ray, sound, everything, all synchronized. Now, if I have that, it's not enough. This is just what I would say kind of stupid reconstruction of the word. But what now we do, a few work that we published last year's in ICCV CBPR, the latest one was 2 months ago presented in CBPR, allows us to automatically generate recognized objects, like in this case, the C-arm, the monitor, the patient, the surgeon, and then create automatically a scene graph. So the first thing we created in computer vision since CBPR 2018, and then ECCV 2019, and now CBPR this year, and there is one coming in ICCV, all in computer vision, was more geometric relationship between this element. But what I need is now to take this computer graph representation and bring it into the surgical workflow. So the first thing we started to do is that to automatically generate a top view, recognize objects, and now we can see the workflow with the timing. We can see a fast workflow of the surgery and start to symbolically present it for engineers so they can manipulate it, but also for the computer to understand. Now the computer has to understand much more semantic. The computer has to create a set of graphs, which are, we call it multimodal semantic graphs, where the relationships are clear. We are hoping to automatically decide that now the C-arm is coming, the patient is getting operated on torso, patient is partially inside CT, but much more intelligent. The doctor is now looking at this information is transferred. All this become link in our semantic scene graph, in which some of the links are spatial, some of the links are semantic, some of the links are verbal communication, and this has to be generated automatically over those tons of surgeries that we are gathering. This is what human does. Human gathers the experience in their memory with all the sensing, and gradually, you know, this was what Aristotle told 2,400 years ago, but now our number of senses are enormous and the complexities are enormous, but we can do it. We can definitely do it. This would be a challenge for maybe next 5 years, but we are on the right path. Then once we did that, once we have this full understanding of what's going on, both spatially, but semantically and all material, everything, then I have to render it to the user. And that could be visual rendering, haptic rendering, audio rendering. And then we have to create user interfaces. And user interfaces in surgery is very challenging. It has to understand the workflow. It has to be context awareness. We need really interaction. And most of all, we need now something which was developed with computer perception. Now it has to be transferred to human perception. Whoa, I'm so late, okay. And so in this work of Atlas, what you saw on that video, the result was augmentation of the laparoscope, because thanks to X-ray and machine learning, we were registering the peak to the CT data, and we were able to then augment this video, the laparoscopic video with aorta and different organs. This is a very close collaboration with Konrad Kars at LMU, the surgeon, and the whole team of Maxer, Erbe, and etc. But, you know, there is a problem there that we are discussing a lot. And that problem, again, back to the problem that they had in London, is the problem of perception. In 2005, we also did a bunch of work in augmented reality that many of you are familiar. Terry Peters showed that yesterday. Some of it is that we started in 2005 to augment the CT data onto the patient. This was in 2005, and about 200 surgeons visited us. They were really excited looking at these augmentations, and they thought that they can use it in surgery. I have told this story several times. After these things in this 2005, and hundreds of surgeons playing around with this system, our surgeon at the hospitals, they told, let's do cadaver studies. And we started to do cadaver studies together. And we compared the CAMC system, the one you saw in BBC with X-ray and optics superimposed, the traditional method, and then this kind of rendering. And they all failed in this kind of rendering. They succeeded with CAMC system, they succeeded with traditional method, but here they failed. And they were very frustrated. And this was, I say, this was the best failure we ever had, because then we sat with the surgeons and had big discussions. And of course, all of us came to the conclusion that the problem was perception. They could not perceive the depth and location very well. So at that point, we go to the last part, which is human perception. So now the user interface has to prepare things for human senses. And if you want to go from those visualization to human senses, then you have to understand human perception, whether it's sound, whether it's audio, whether it's visual, whether it's haptic. Now you have to adapt it. And there is a bunch of work in that direction. Some of them Terry talked about, but in our case, we started, those frustrated surgeons were the best guys, who 20 of them came, and we started to evaluate all the methods that existed at that time and showed them different visualization that was developed by different groups, including the window into the body, the semi-transparent, that one was by Henry Fuchs, the semi-transparent surface, a lot of techniques, and we compared them, and we presented this comparison in MICAE 2006, I think. Now, after that, we found out that none of this would be completely satisfactory in terms of perception. Each of them had a particular intelligence, but they were not taking us all the way. So we started to see, okay, if I want to do some such things and I want to show the bones, of course, I don't want to see it like this, because then I completely lose my perception. Now, we started to combine some techniques. And in our case, the difference between our technique and what Terry was yesterday showing from Guangzhou Guiyang and Imperial College, where they were doing PQ, here we had the 3D. So we combined three factors. First of all, we compute the point of the focus of the user by tracking the HMD, and then putting a Gaussian on the video, a Gaussian of opacity. Then we computed the angle of incidence to this normal to the surface with a philosophy that if I look through a window, I see through it. If my angle becomes tilted, then I see less. And then finally, we looked at the 3D high curvatures and kept them opaque. And then finally, we added some other perceptual cue, in this case, shadow and light as the direction of our camera, and shadow of that, which is artificial. And the nice thing is the shadow, as you see here, goes both on top of real and virtual, and confuses you what is real, what is virtual, because it covers everything. And it creates a continuity in those things. So these were some stuff, but we are hoping that the community in this summer school comes with tens of solutions helping us. And you will see right away the effect that instead of seeing this thing floating, exactly the same superimposition, exactly the same videos. If we do it now, you look at the perceptual view of what that I explained, the exact same view would be like this. And now you feel seeing inside the body because of this ghosting, because of the focus of attention, because of the normal to the surface, and etc. But the final part, which is also a component which has to be iterated throughout the whole process, is validation and ethics. And something I learned from a professor of ethics in Munich very recently, is that one of the basic mistakes that the engineers do is that first they design the whole thing, and when their system is ready, they start to do ethics and mostly for validation. But she was telling, no, the moment you think of a problem, the moment you think of a solution, that's the moment you have to think of ethics. That's the moment you have to think which approach I should take, where at the end, I will have an ethical solution. I can do an ethical validation. And I love that. So this has to be something that is iterated. Validation and also human experience and animal experience, this has to be in the loop. This is not something that you can do at the very end. And even if you do it at the very end, from my point of view, it's completely invalid to compare something that people were doing for centuries with something you just developed and expect that this validation would have any values. So if you want to validate, then you have to, again, listen to Christopher Stapleton and say, at the end, the surgeon is making this very high intensity performance of decision, action, and information. And you have to not forget that everything you provide them is in this circle. So integration into the workflow is very important. I am stealing a little bit from our next speaker, Greg Osgood, who was one of my great collaborator. And the only reason I'm showing to you very quickly is that with Greg, we came to integrate the whole thing into A to Z workflow that is now presented at TMI, where he actually used augmented reality to define the entry point and the target point for his drilling into the body. And as he did it in the two displays, he didn't like the HoloLens 1 interaction, but the rest was fine. As soon as he defined the input and the target point, the interesting thing was now he could look at the patient and could see directly the frustums of X-ray and could also see where he's going to do the drilling. And then he could take the virtual drill that was automatically there. He could take the real drill from Javad and start aligning the real drill with the virtual drill. And now suddenly augmented reality was helping him from A to Z, and he could do the whole alignment. I love this to be combined with sonification, with audification and listening to the drilling, as you will see on Wednesday by Matthias Seibold and etc. So, but this is full integration into the workflow from A to Z. And Greg may talk about it more. But when we come to validation and ethics, one of the things is, as I talked about it yesterday, is democratization. How many minutes am I over my time? Over or before? No, not 45, 55 or 60. Okay, I think the questions you can ask me throughout the summer school. So, there we need to already start thinking of training and telemedicine and everything. That's where we talked yesterday about ethics. So some of the things we started to bring in was to bring frustums of X-ray to be able to teach what is the physics of X-ray. And then at the end of the surgery, Alex Johnson, one of our other greatest speakers in this summer school, was telling he would love to come and see exactly how many, the 100 X-rays that he had taken through a surgery to see what happened. And my dream is to combine this with what I showed you from 4D reconstruction of the operating room, such that I can reproduce a surgery from A to Z, but also understand at each level where the frustum of X-ray came, which information was transmitted to the doctor. And if we do that, then we can train everyone around the planet to learn from someone like Greg Osgood or Alex Johnson or Mazda Farshad. Some of the best in the world would be teaching all of our surgeons around the world. This was something we did for teaching X-ray and procedures of a spine without any X-ray. Thanks to the camera attached and the CAMSI system, we could, and thanks to machine learning, we could simulate X-rays and do the whole training without X-ray. Then we thought even for that, we need the C-arm. So we started to say, only things that I touch needs to be real, everything else, including the C-arm, including the X-ray generation, everything could be virtual. So I can train it even if I'm sitting in anywhere. I just need the, in this case, a little needle and a phantom, and then the rest would be into my HMD and I could see it. But if I touch something to control a C-arm, that I want it to be physically again, because when I go to a real operating room, everything I touch, I want it to be real. Everything I don't touch can be virtual. Then we started a big project called Med, where we started to do telemanipulation. The surgeon is in a virtual reality at home or in Germany. The other young surgeon has augmented reality at a completely different place. And then the main surgeon is explaining to the remote surgeon how to do the surgery, from where to start to cut, and the other one is seeing. So this is a real-time transmission in Medica in November. We will have it in real time in Düsseldorf. There would be a demonstration, and the surgeon would be in Munich. And then you could go there, put the HMD on your head, and then the doctor can explain you how to in Düsseldorf, and you will do it there. So I hope we win the challenge. And then a lot of things come in. We had a few papers in the last years where you can take a part of virtuality, magnify it, do a better explanation, and the system knows where it belongs to. We called it Magnorama. Finally, I would say we need to focus on the patient in the center, and therefore we absolutely need to look at surgical workflow. Therefore, we need to work with a lot of surgeons, and that's why we do have this summer school where in 2019 we brought surgeons, industry, which makes things happen in terms of instrumentation, imaging, and technology, and also scientists together, guided by this esprit that we need to work together in the next slide and optimize the function I showed you at the very beginning. And Balgrist allowed us to go to operating room and see surgeries and discuss with surgeons, which was also amazing. But at the end, I have to thank generations after generations of our PhD students at Munich, at Johns Hopkins, who enabled me to understand and learn everything I have learned and to do everything we have done. Thank you. I think the time I went over my question and answer time, no?
No, we have 5 minutes left for question and answers. So if there are any questions, please ask them through the chat or questions from the room here. I can also forward to Professor Navab.
If there is any burning question, we can discuss them, but I hope also that throughout the summer school, we discuss, in particular, I'm very interested to discuss about the definition, because for me, definition of medical augmented reality still does not exist. You have to define it. You have to tell us what is this definition. And also the picture you saw in how the components is absolutely incomplete, and many things has to be added to it. Many things has to be taught about that we did not talk about. So please be brave and come up and say we are wrong here and we are wrong there, and you have much better ideas. That's how we can move on. Otherwise, we will not be able to move forward. Any question? Any comments?
I have a question.
Sure, sure.
You were talking about surgeons and how you were trying different visualizations. How much time did you give them? Because I think it's similar to reverse arthroscopy, and sometimes you generate new memory and then get new intuition, and if that time is short, for sure you're not satisfied with the short connection.
Can I ask your background?
I'm a medical student.
Medical student. So we have a question here from a medical student. I'm repeating it because this is in person. She's asking that when you did experimentation and with validations or testing with surgeons, how much did you give them time to train and to get used to this new environment? I should tell you, these experiences of working with surgeons have been amazing, sometimes completely disappointing, sometimes completely enriching. And I give you a few examples, anecdotes of that. But it's very hard. I can tell you it's very hard because now, thanks to talking to some of the experts, you need really experts. We are not expert in usability and perception or human analysis. People like Roy Eagleson, or we will have Merle Fairhurst tomorrow talking. There are people who are expert in these kinds of experimentation and validation. We should really talk to them, because I agree, if you bring something for the first time, so what, for example, Merle in case of sonification was telling us, that as soon as, this was very interesting for me, he was telling, the moment you start to design your system, you have to design your training. And before doing any validation, you have to have a system which is training. So when we started with Roy Eagleson, interacting with Patrick Wucherer and Philipp Stefan 8 years ago, we were thinking of validation. And then Roy came to Munich and told us, you have to have a real training center. So we did a lot of, he may talk about it, I'm not sure, but we did together a lot of realistic training scenarios with many surgeons. We published some TMI with 19 surgeons. And so we learned from him, and we are learning from Merle, that this has to go hand to hand. Otherwise, it's invalid. And now I give you an anecdote of a negative experience. I had a student, he was working on augmentation of brain structures back in 2008. And his name was Tassilo. He's a manager of SAP now, Tassilo Klein. And he was interested in augmented reality for visualization of critical structures in brain. And then he spent so much time creating phantoms with different structures. And then he had these phantoms printed in the lab. And then he asked surgeons to come and look into the augmented reality and drill into it. He didn't think that the surgeons know that these phantoms have no life and they are worthless from them, so they will not die. So they came, and most of them in the middle of their busy day, they came and in matter of 30 seconds destroyed our phantom. And the results were completely useless because they didn't pay attention to anything. I mean, only Dr. Euler and Dr. Sandra Heining, a few guys who were behind our research, they did. And their results was meaningful because they were also familiar with the system, with augmented reality. That's why Dr. Euler is all of our videos, because Sandro left, but Sandro and Euler, and then later Simon Weidert, they were deep into the system. So their results was perfect. But all other surgeons destroyed our phantoms, and we couldn't publish it actually because it was not valuable. So your point is extremely well taken. I mean, you have to think of training, you have to think of how to validate, you have to think of how to extrapolate. And the good news is that they are experts in the world that they can help us with that. So we should not do it ourselves. Neither the technicians or engineers nor the surgeons, we should not do it directly. We should really work with people who have human study experience, validation. And then they can teach us a lot. So a long path, but very interesting, very exciting. I think now I'm over time.
Yeah, thank you for the extensive answer. And there's a few more questions in the chat. I think for the sake of time, we move forward with the next.
Sure, and please send it to me. I will throughout tomorrow and the days where we have it students, maybe when we get breaks or things, we can discuss the questions. Definitely. I would love to answer. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much for your talk.